You have no follow-up questions upon finding out that your boyfriend is possibly a murderer? I'm sorry, maybe I'm just not romantic like that. Happy fall, guys. It is officially September. I know I'm super late with this video, but I just want to pause and go over all the books that I read in August. It literally was the month that like small town romance, save a horse, ride a cowboy took over my life. So the first book that I read in August was Grayson's Vow by Mia Sheridan. Now, the main reason that I picked this up was probably the main reason you recognize the name Mia Sheridan is because I love Archer's voice. I gave that book 5 stars. It is one of my favorites. I still think about it. I still reread it from time to time. And so obviously I figured I should pick up Grayson's Vow. Now, Grayson's Vow is about Kira Dallaire, and she comes from a very broken home. She was previously engaged. It went poorly. Her father basically gave her an ultimatum and was like, I am not gonna let you talk badly about your fiance, even though he did terrible things to you, because it'd be bad for my campaign. So Kira felt like she had no choice. She left her house. She was homeless. She had no money, but she did have a trust fund, which was left to her by her grandma. The stipulations of the trust fund were that either she turns 25 and gets $1 million or she gets married. So at 22 years old, she doesn't want to wait 3 more years, so she decides to get married. It just happens to be fortuitous that she ends up at a bank and recognizes one of the people who's asking for a loan. His name is Grayson. Grayson just got out of prison for a murder. It was accidental. I feel like that's important for me to mention. And so he's coming out and asking for a loan because his father had just died and left him a dying vineyard, and he's trying to resurrect this place of business. The bank, upon learning his history, does not want to give him a loan, so she actually recognizes him because her father, turns out, was a main factor in the reason that Grayson was sentenced to prison for so long. So she feels kind of bad, but she decides not to tell him about that and just propositions him in his vineyard and says, listen, I have this trust fund. I can prove to you everything that I have. Will you please marry me? Grayson at first does not want anything to do with her, but eventually, due to the fact that he just doesn't see another option to resurrect the vineyard, he does go ahead and marry her. She says that, listen, I need it to look very believable. I need to live with you because I know that my father will make a mess of this if he finds out that for some reason this isn't a true marriage. So she actually moves into his vineyard. So the two of them really don't get along at first. It is a marriage of convenience. It is kind of fake dating, which I love those tropes. But eventually Kira and Grayson end up getting closer. There's staff on the vineyard who end up being very endeared to Kira, and they start having this little family. So the rating that I gave this book was 3.5 stars, just because Kira and Grayson's relationship was not the most spectacular. I feel like there could have been a lot more emotional moments between the two. I feel like they spent a lot of time fighting, more so than getting to know each other. I don't know, like it just felt kind of flat for me. I did like the found family trope in this, the fact that the workers were like so close to both Kira and Grayson. I did like the setting. I thought that having a romance on this vineyard was so cute. It wasn't horrible and it wasn't anything great, so I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book I read was Wildcard by Cambria Herbert, and this is starring Rush and Landry. Wildcard is book number 5 in the series Westbrook Elite. It is part of a series, but it can be read as a standalone. So I've read all the other books in this series, but it's not necessary to understand the events that are going on in this book. And I'm going to tell you in a minute, because the events that are happening in this book are just unhinged. Rush just transferred from another school. He's now on the elite swimming team with a bunch of the guys who are stars in the other books. He actually was forced to leave his other school because of the fact that he was accused of murdering someone. It was his best friend's little sister. So the book starts off with describing that scene and what he remembers from the events of that night. Nobody believes that he didn't do it, even his best friend, and so he kind of flees California to go to Westbrook to be on their swimming team. Landry is actually the coach's daughter. He doesn't know that, but they end up having an immediate physical relationship. They meet 2 seconds later. They are hooking up in the locker room. Insta lust is not my favorite thing. If it's yours, cool, but not for me. I love the slow burn. So like when they immediately started like whatever, I was just like, Okay. I felt very weird about how to rate this book because there's like a certain genre of book. If you read romance books, you know what I'm talking about. There's a genre where the book is just meant for smutty purposes. Like it's literally just to be the smuttiest, filthiest, like boiled down romance ever, and it's supposed to be insta-lust. I completely get that. But then there are romance books that are trying to build a connection, have a plot, maybe have some smut in it, but that's secondary to the romance. I could not tell what this book was trying to be because it was so utterly ridiculous. So like at one point, her dad, who's the coach, is like calling her out. He was like, "Get so fucking for real right now." She was like, "No, I'm in love." And I know he didn't do anything. I did not question it at all. She was like, "I knew immediately that he didn't murder that girl." And I was like, "You have no follow-up questions upon finding out that your boyfriend is possibly a murderer?" I'm sorry, maybe I'm just not romantic like that. Please don't gaslight me. Validate me that that is ridiculous. So I was like, okay, if this is supposed to be a smutty nonsense book, 3 stars. However, if it's attempting to have a plot and this is supposed to be romance, 1 star. So I averaged and I gave it 2 stars. I still don't know what it was about. There was a lot of swimming, a lot of murder, a lot of drama. Will I read her next book in the series? 1000% I will. The next book that I read was Scarred by Emily McIntyre. This is book number 2 in the Never After series. The first one was Hooked. I did a review of that in my last reading wrap up, so go check that out. But this is book number 2, and this, if you don't know the premise, they're all dark fairy tale retellings. And so this book is, I think you can tell by the title, is a retelling of The Lion King, particularly Scar. The main character is Tristan Fossa, that's supposed to be Scar, and then his brother, Michael Fossa, is the king now that their father died. Michael Fossa is betrothed to Sarah. She has actually been perfectly planted to take over as queen, but with her own nefarious purposes. She blames the Fossa line for killing her father and wants to basically kill all of them. However, when Sarah and Tristan meet, obviously they have some romantic feelings for each other, and meanwhile Tristan is actually forming a rebellion with the people who really hate what's happened to the kingdom. Michael is actually very corrupt despite being a copy of Mufasa. Ever since he was a child, Michael has like terrorized Tristan, and Tristan cannot let that go. My feelings of this book, it just gave me a giant ick. Tristan was not doing it for me. The dark, morally gray anti-hero was not anti-heroing. Felt like he was just murdering, hurting people. Like, that doesn't really bother me, but like I want them to be Damon Salvatore coded. Like I want them to have a soft spot. I want them to generally care about people, sort of deep down. This guy, generally, he threatened women. I really can't look past that. I know that is hypocritical of me, but that's just not something that I'm about. Because like when guys only care about you and they don't care about other women in their lives or women in general, that's a red flag. Because as soon as you don't give him what he's seeking for from you, oh, you're just like any other woman that he doesn't care about. But overall, this book just like did not do it for me. So I gave it 2 stars. The next book I read in August was If You Could See the Sun by Anne Liang. I've been meaning to read this for so long. Obviously, we want to support our Asian authors, and this whole book was actually set in Beijing, which I really, really liked. It was a whole different culture, a whole different type of environment because they're also in this really hyper expensive boarding school, and the main character is one of the top students in the class. Her name is Alice Sun. It's also a bit of a paranormal romance. Alice Sun is extremely motivated. She is very smart, and she has an academic rival named Henry. Now, Henry is constantly beating her in everything. They're pretty much neck and neck in like every single activity. Unfortunately though, Alice has just learned from her parents that it's getting to be really difficult to continue paying for her tuition fees. Her parents are not rich by any means. They actually tried to move to America and then they couldn't make it, and they went home just because it was really hard for them to be constantly discriminated against in American society, but they still don't have a lot of money and it's getting really hard to pay for her schooling. Upon feeling the insane pressure to decide, Alice does not know what to do, and then one day they're at this awards ceremony and she sees Henry and everything that he's accomplished. All of her classmates who are so rich they don't have a care in the world. She starts to feel sick. She actually turns invisible. She doesn't know how it happens. It's never happened to her before. She doesn't know how to really control it, but it's just a cool little superpower that she's suddenly attained. And she decides to disclose this to Henry, but she also has a money issue. So she proposes to Henry and she's like, like, listen, what if we created like an app or a website that allows people to pay for someone to either spy on another person, obtain information, get some dirt on other people? Henry's like, I'm down. He created this whole app for her. His dad is actually part of a technology conglomerate, so he's been like coding since he was in diapers. So he makes this app for her called Beijing Ghost, and all of her classmates suddenly start dropping hundreds, thousands of dollars to get her to find dirt on other people. It ends up being very lucrative, and she makes hundreds of thousands of dollars on it, which is great, but her school upped their tuition, and she's basically becoming so desperate that she starts making very poor decisions. Eventually, I don't want to spoil it, but a request comes through on this app that is not only horrible, but also illegal. Alice has to decide whether she has to follow her moral compass or if she wants the money to stay in the school. I have never rooted for a main character so hard. Listen, she's very flawed, she makes very bad decisions, but listening to her reasoning and understanding the fact that like she doesn't have the worries that her classmates has. Her classmates are worried about partying, deciding which Ivy League schools to go to, where they're gonna go on vacation, and she's worrying about how are her parents gonna make rent? How is she gonna continue to go to school so that she can get them out of poverty eventually? It just broke my heart when she had to come to this in order to break even on her schooling and hopefully not lose the chance to make something of herself. She made some poor decisions, don't get me wrong, but I've never felt so bad for a character and just wanted them to succeed so badly in life. I also just like the fact that she paired up with her academic rival, and they did have an academic rivals to lovers trope. I think the popular TikTok quote is like, she was like, I can't believe we hate each other. And he was like, wait, we hate each other? You know he's down bad for her. Henry was an amazing book boyfriend. Like, he was just so respectful, so kind, and he's a Swiftie, so we have to give it to him. I think that this book was so cute. It is a YA romance. It's not steamy in any way. I just think it was a great read through and through. It was very interesting. It's also a very short read, and look at this cover. Love it. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I thought that it was so cool. The setting was wonderful. I think there were so many real world applications to this, even though this is a paranormal romance. It acknowledged things like socioeconomic status, racism, cultural differences between American Asian versus Asian, the difficulties of being an immigrant. I just think that it was such a good, detailed read. I love it. So please go ahead and give this book a read. It was fantastic. The next book I read in August was Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welsh. I stinking love this book. So cute. And I won't go into it too much just because I included this in my summer reads video. So go ahead and watch that. But I just want to say that this book blew me away. Main premise is that Lena is American. She recently just lost her mother due to cancer, and her mother at the end of her life starts reminiscing about all the great times that she had in Italy as a college student, and she starts talking about her good friend Howard. Now Lena's just like very confused, like, why do you keep talking about this? And it turns out that Lena's mother thinks that the best opportunity for Lena now that she's gone is to live in Italy with Howard. Now, she finds out from her grandmother that Howard is actually her dad, who hasn't been in her life for the last 16 years. She's extremely confused. She doesn't know why all of a sudden her mom decides to bring him up. And so she actually moves from America to Italy to go to high school. Lena is very much convinced that she's gonna hate it there. She only wants to stay there for the summer to fulfill her promise to her mom. But Howard is trying to convince her that she should be going to school and living the rest of her life in Italy. God, I love Howard. His coworker, Sonia, actually received a journal in the mail that Lena's mother had wrote. It was all about her time in Italy, all the experiences that she had in real time, and then on the top, in the present, her mother had wrote, I made the wrong choice. Lena's trying to figure out what her mother's trying to tell her, and so she reads this journal, and at the same time, she meets a very nice guy named Ren. He is a local Italian boy, and he goes to the school that Lena would have gone to if she would have stayed there for the year, and she says like, hey, I would really appreciate it if you would show me the places that my mother is talking about in this journal, because she wants to experience it in the way that her mother did. Love it so much. Please check it out. I did give this a 4.5 stars. I think it was beautiful. Definitely give this a read. Even if it isn't the summertime, I still think this deserves a read. The next very many books is where my small town romance starts. They are all from the same series. They are all by the same person, Catherine Cowles. Don't tell me why I read her entire series. All 5 books, literally in like a week. The first book I heard about because I was Googling books with age gap romance because that's what does it for me. And this came up. This is Fractured Sky by Catherine Cowles. This is the reason why I read this out of order. I read the 5th book in the series first, starring Shiloh and Ramsey. Shiloh as a child was actually kidnapped. The struggle with her is, yes, she is haunted by that kidnapping. The person who kidnapped her is still kind of tormenting her by sending her letters. But I feel like in the beginning of the book, her main issue was the fact that her family was so overprotective of her that it was killing her. She's 27 years old and her family doesn't want her to be out on her own. She lives on their land. She works at their farm. And so Ramsey owns a farm not too far away. His job is actually rehabilitating very sick and distrusting or abused horses. And so for the last 9 years, Shiloh has been riding her horse, unbeknownst to her family, by his farm and kind of watching him with the horses. They would never speak up until now. Ramsey also is kind of withdrawn. He does not like communicating with people. It's very much, I hate everyone but you. He did go to prison for a crime that he didn't commit, and he was attacked in prison because it was ordered by his stepfather. So he's very mistrusting of people. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. But for some reason, one day they decide to talk, and she lets it out that like she feels suffocated by her family, who is like very overbearing, and he offers to let her stay in his cottage. At the same time, there are some weird nefarious things going on. He's getting scared that someone's trying out to attack her, and so they start to end up closer proximity as he's trying to take care of her, and they end up falling in love. My problem with this book is the same problem with every other book in this entire series, and it is that the plot is never centralized about the connection between the two people. You think how traumatized these people are? The author would have a lot to write about. No, it is always the conflict. Re-traumatize the female character and have the male character save her. What? I read the entire series and her kidnapping affected their family and every single person in it for the next 20 years. And yet the author's like, you know what? Let's give you something else to worry about for the next 20 years. Either they get shot, kidnapped, held at gunpoint, they get hit in the head where they black out, and then the other person saves them. And that's literally the plot device of every single book. Now you may be like, Julie, if it's so bad and you hate it so much, why'd you keep reading? Because they're so digestible. If not for that stupid plot device, I would think that these books are fantastic. I think the characterization is great. I think that the way that romance is written is awesome. There are so many different tropes in here that I love, and yet I can only give these books up to 3.75 stars. I did give it 3.75 stars. And also the fact that this keeps happening to like every person in this family by different unhinged people in this town. Get the fuck out of here. There's so many freaks running around in this town. I would not trust this town again. If I were a resident in that town, I would skedaddle. So then I started from the top with the beginning of the series, Tattered Stars. Tattered Stars is about Everly and Hayes. Everly is actually the daughter of the guy who kidnapped Shiloh as a child. And it was actually her who saved Shiloh because she went to the police, betrayed her father, and they were able to get her. Everly, because of that, was excommunicated by her family. They're a part of a community that like fully believes in anarchy and like does not trust the government, doesn't believe in laws. They don't want to rely on anything but the land. It's a very weird community. They're also inherently misogynistic and they don't treat the women very well. Now it's about like 10 plus something years later, she moves back to the town. Her father had left her the land that Shiloh was actually kidnapped on, and so Everly decides to go back to town to rebuild it into an animal sanctuary and to do something good with the evil that her father created, which I think is a very noble process. That's awesome. However, Hayes, who is the brother of Shiloh, hears that she's returned back to town and does not like that. But his family does not feel the same way. So his entire family, including Shiloh, is very grateful to Everly. They straightened him up real quick and they were like, you better forgive her. Like, you better go apologize to her because she saved your sister. Some weird things start happening and therefore Everly has to communicate with Hayes because he's the sheriff. So anytime a crime is committed, like, she has to interact with him, and eventually they become a couple. I think that this book was cute. It was quick. It was digestible. Again, she is going to be threatened in some way. He's going to be threatened in some way, but ultimately he saves her because he's a cop and blah, blah, blah. 3.5 stars. The next book that I read was number 2 in the Tattered and Torn series. It is Falling Embers by Catherine Cowles. This is between Calder and Hadley. Calder is the best friends of one of Hadley's brothers, so it's brother's best friend Chope. And Hadley is the sister of Shiloh, who was kidnapped. Now, as a result of Shiloh's kidnapping, Hadley's family would not let Hadley live her life. They refused to let her go anywhere, do anything. I think it's just a double standard because her brothers were allowed to do God knows what, but with her, they would not let her because it reminded them too much of Shiloh. As an adult, Hadley is pretty reckless. She does all of these really dangerous activities. Her job is an EMT. She hasn't told her family about this, but she's actually kind of an influencer on a website that's basically YouTube. She makes a lot of money doing these dangerous stunts. But basically the main tension is between Hadley and her mother. So her mother really dislikes how Hadley lives her life. She tells her that she's selfish, she's awful, and Hadley just does not want to be around her, and it's causing tension for the rest of the family who are trying to get along. Calder is her brother's best friend. He actually has twin girls, single dad trope. I always like those. I think they're really good. And so then Calder and Hadley actually had kind of a connection when they were younger, and then it faded away. However, now that they're back in each other's lives, Calder's trying to be okay with the fact that she's a very free spirit and the fact that she's so close to his daughters. Even though they've been bickering all this time, she's definitely still had a relationship with his daughters, which I love. What I did not like, there were two parts of this conflict. Number one, I did like the fact that there was a secondary conflict besides the fact, of course, gotta have a murderer. There was a secondary conflict between the mom and Hadley. Upon finding out that Hadley and Calder are together, the mom basically goes to Calder in front of everyone and is you should not be with her. She's a horrible person. She's not going to be a good mother to your children. Thankfully, her family does stand up to her, especially Calder. And the only reason in the end that she changed her mind was because Hadley was in a life-threatening situation. I don't like that. That's not emotional development. You were just scared. I feel the mother should have put a lot more work into going to therapy and recognizing her issues. I feel it was just a quick fix between them having this blowout and her having a come to God moment. This book I thought was fine. I wish that I liked this better because it's everything I love. Brother's best friend, it's single dad trope. I was so excited for this book. I was just so disappointed. It didn't feel like a strong development as much as the other books. So I just gave this 3 stars. Not horrible, just mid. And then the 4th book in the series is next. It's Shattered Sea. This book I was actually pleasantly surprised by. I actually didn't want to read this book at all because it wasn't related to the main family in the story. Lakin owns this art store, art gallery in the middle of this town, and she has definitely been very closed off due to the fact that when she was a teenager, she lost the love of her life in a car accident. They talked about kids, marriage, and their whole future, and he passed away, unfortunately. That part of the story was pretty interesting to learn about. It's been 10 years, and it's definitely reflected on the fact that she thinks that she misses her best friend more than she misses her boyfriend, and she was I don't know if we would have still been together by now, but she was we definitely would have been in each other's lives. At the same time, Bowden, who is actually a very famous actor, has also lost his girlfriend. 6 months ago, he lost his girlfriend who turned to drugs because of his brother. So the two of these people meet because Bowden's I need to obtain some type of knowledge about horses in this type of town from Ramsey, who is Shiloh's boyfriend, because he wants his next movie. He's trying to be a director to feel kind of authentic. He stumbles into the town. He sees this amazing photograph that Lakin has in her gallery and asks to buy it, and that's how they meet. Unbeknownst to him, Lakin is actually the photographer as well, but there's a problem because all the people in Lakin's accident, that original accident, because all of her friends were driving as well, they start to die off one by one. She starts getting worried about her life, so does Bowden, so they end up getting closer in proximity due to that fact. They're trying to basically understand the process of grief and learning how to incorporate that in their relationship. I actually really liked their relationship. I thought this book was so cute, and once again, the only thing that made me knock this down to a 3.75 was the fact that the threat was a psycho. This many things should not be happening in a row in a town. How could there be this many freaks? Again, very cute, very digestible. I actually liked this one the best. It was very cute. The last book I read in August was another one of Catherine Cowles, but it was from a different series. This series is called Lost and Found. The first book is Whisper Whispers of You. So this entire series is definitely the premise of second chance romance. This first one is about high school sweethearts who were not together for 10 years and then come back into contact and try to have a relationship again. Ren and Holt have always been in each other's lives. Ren is best friends with Holt's sister. They've been together for as long as anyone can remember. One night, she's like cooking dinner for them. She's in her house alone. She unfortunately is the victim of a break-in. These two guys who she knew from her school shot her, and Holt was actually late for dinner and found her bleeding out on the floor. He blamed himself for her near-death experience, and he actually breaks up with her in a letter and dips from her life. What the hell? You feel guilty, so you abandon her? Sure, fine. He does every dangerous thing in the world to sort of make up for what he did to his girlfriend. He's like a soldier. He does all of these risky security company jobs. Meanwhile, Ren is still part of his family in his hometown. She never left. So he hasn't been back in town for more than a couple days in about 10 years, but his father actually had a heart attack, and so it makes him reevaluate that like maybe he should be in his parents' lives. Upon seeing him again, she's just bitter. Once again, something life-threatening happens, and suddenly they're forced back in proximity together. I think she just forgave him too quickly. If my boyfriend abandoned me after I got shot, oh, we would be having words. I think the book was okay. I'm so sorry I keep saying that, but all of her books were literally the same. So 3.5 stars. I really liked the setting. All of these books. I like the setting. I like the characters. The plot was just horrible. I still did really enjoy them. Of course I enjoyed them. I like read them in quick succession. They were so digestible and so fun, but just know that you're not getting anything like earth-shattering. So those were all the books that I read in August. I hope you guys had a good reading month as well. I'm so excited that now I get to get into my spooky books that I've been preserving for spooky season. I'm so excited. Right now my current read is Fourth Wing. That video is coming out soon, so I hope you guys are excited. Please let me know what you read this month, or if you have any recommendations for me. I love you guys. See you next one. Bye.
Look at her style from the street. Look at her style from the ghetto. This I will never make it big.